And that kind of brings us to also like the gap, the fiduciary gap of like there's X% of people that are investing in it, but then they're not really actually utilizing it in their financial planning.
Yes. I mean, when you look at the capital that flows into AI, it is, I mean, throwing tens of billions of dollars in investment into it. There are, we were having this conversation about family offices that, you see 50% of their portfolio exposed to AI.
50%.
50% or more. And then, but when you look at the amount of investment portfolio, or excuse me, when you look at their investment portfolio, it's over 50%. But when you look at how much they're actually using it internally, you see maybe 10, 15% of tasks. And those are numbers that largely come from surveys. So those are family offices that are self-identifying what they're doing with AI. But at the same time, that's an interesting little lens into what's going on out there, because everybody feels like they need to be invested in AI. But when you start looking at the finance people who are making those decisions of investment and you look at how much they're using AI, you're coming to a much smaller number. And that is, I think, something that Anthropic really uncovered in that exposure metric that they invented, which is more or less kind of an indicator. It's a multi-variable indicator of what an automated job really looks like relative to the amount that you could expose that job to being automated by AI. And I think what they uncovered is that even though you have theoretical exposure that's through the roof, especially in some of these finance functions, you're just not seeing it explored fully by most organizations for a number of challenges that include the hallucination thing we talked about, the regulatory pieces that we talked about. And then on top of that, I think that most of these firms in these surveys, as if you look at what we wrote in the paper, are really identifying skills issues as just a tremendous, kind of hold on what they're able to do.
What do you mean by skills issues?
So if you do want to take your spreadsheet and put it into, say, a prompt and really kind of get some summarization or some collaborative tool out of it, then the first thing you're going to want to do is you go to a prompt and you upload the spreadsheet and you start asking questions. Most people can do that. But then when you need something more, you need to start joining spreadsheets together. Suddenly people go, okay, wait, I might need a database person to go off and do this. And that means getting somebody who can kind of wrangle this data and get it into a collaborative form in some server. So then we start putting some kind of business intelligence tool on top of it. And so now we're putting a Tableau or a Looker or a Power BI on top of these tools, and we're starting to now just kind of build a data warehouse, just like we've always been doing for the last 20 years. So, how is AI really doing anything different for me? And I think that there are some, just tremendous leaps in potential that we have taken in how you take this kind of data and how you're able to answer questions on it, collaborate on it, and build intelligence systems on it, and even make decisions and automate actions your business can take on top of that. But when you start looking at whether or not finance professionals feel enabled to do that with the skills that they have without bringing other people in, I think we're coming up really short on that stuff.
Gotcha. Another thing you talked about in your paper was not allowing the models to use arithmetic, not allowing them to, make calculations. What are the reasons for that?
So, kind of going back to what we talked about in terms of hallucinations, right? You've got this parametric memory that is trying to predict the best token output. I've done experiments myself where I say, hey, take a table here and just sum up the values in the table. And it almost gets it right, but it actually doesn't. The arithmetic is just wrong because it is predicting the text that should come out in terms of that summation rather than performing the calculation under the hood. So you really do have to understand how these things are thinking a little bit if you're going to use them reliably. And one of the things you don't want is really for any of these LLMs to be doing your mathematical calculations under the hood. What you want them to do is come up with a summarizing narrative. They're really great at that. And then to say, by the way, as part of this summarizing narrative, I need to calculate this plus this plus this plus that, or I need to take everything in this table and sum it up, and then describe that in a language that you can turn around and provide to some kind of program that can read that language and come up with that result. And that combination gives you a much better level of intelligence because now you have something that is good at discussing and talking and coming up with those narratives, but you have a reliability in it because of that deterministic computation that you're able to produce. And the LLM is very good at specifying what that deterministic computation should be, but it's not good at actually doing the computation, right? So when you set up your system, so you have a little bit of separation between things like what is the narrative, which the LLM will be great at coming up with, what information do I draw on in order to come up with the facts and conclusions I need to come up with here, and then what calculations do I need to make or logical inferences do I need to make in order to get to the leaps I really want to make? And then separately, okay, how do I now summarize that for a human? An LLM has a role in a couple of those pieces, but not in every piece. And so you really want to separate that out.
Yeah, for sure. I thought of it while you were talking about, like, 2 plus 2, everyone knows that it's going to be 4. That's how the LLM is working. It's predicting that, that's usually 4 is the answer. But when you give it that large thing, the large data set, and you're saying, okay, add all these up, then it's getting lost because it hasn't really been designed to do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And so it's almost like if you and I say 2 plus 2, we know it's 4, and we're not really doing any math in the way our brains work because we've just heard that so many times, right?
Yeah.
And that's what an LLM is doing. So now if you try to do that same kind of thing with 232 plus times 34, you can't use that same piece of your brain. You actually have to sit down, most of us anyway, have to sit down and actually work it out. And that's what an LLM isn't doing.
Gotcha. You also talked about, we talked about arithmetic, we talked about hallucinations, we talked about regulation. What about privacy with all the regulations in that?
It's a great question because there is so much confusion out there about what you're sharing with an LLM when you get on ChatGPT and you start typing things. And the fact is, most people are sharing a lot with the business that they're interacting with, especially in a personal nature. And then are a little bit alarmed to go back through their conversations and think, wait, I've just shared my contact info, my health info, my address in some case, or asked about my neighborhood, and I've just shared all these things. And you think, wow, I'd be surprised if Google has all this information on me, and Google's been tracking me for decades.